My name is Natalie. I am 33 years old, and the divorce papers in my hand felt surprisingly light for something meant to destroy my life. I stared at the crisp white pages, then looked up at my husband's face. He was not looking at me with grief or guilt, or even basic human decency. Instead, Ryan was using every ounce of his willpower just to keep from smiling. Standing right beside him in the center of our custom-designed living room was his 28-year-old assistant Amber. She sighed softly, her eyes roaming over the velvet accent chairs and the imported marble coffee table, admiring my luxurious home while completely unaware of the absolute nightmare tomorrow would bring for both of them. Empty houses never lie, but arrogant men always do. Ryan cleared his throat, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. He always cared more about how he looked than how he acted. We had been married for 5 years, but looking at him now, he felt like a stranger who had simply overstayed his welcome in my life. "You need to sign the last page, Natalie," Ryan said, his tone dripping with fake patience. His voice echoed slightly against the high ceilings of the grand foyer. "Let us make this as clean and quick as possible. I already spoke with my lawyer this morning. The prenuptial agreement is ironclad. You know this house is my premarital asset. I owned the deed before I ever put a ring on your finger, and I intend to keep it exactly that way." I kept my expression entirely blank. I did not scream. I did not throw the expensive crystal vase sitting next to me. I just looked at the papers. He was a high-end realtor, a man who sold million-dollar dreams to wealthy clients, and he was currently trying to close the most ruthless deal of his life right in our living room. He wanted me out, and he wanted his new toy moved in before the weekend. Amber shifted her weight, pretending to look sympathetic while adjusting her designer handbag. A bag I knew for a fact cost more than her monthly salary at the brokerage. "I am so sorry it had to happen this way, Natalie," she murmured, her voice sickeningly sweet. "But Ryan and I just have this undeniable connection. We cannot fight fate. We really want to start our life together without any negative energy holding us back." I slowly shifted my gaze to her. Negative energy. That was what she called 5 years of marriage, countless sacrifices, and me funding the lifestyle that made her boss look successful enough to sleep with. She stood there in my house, breathing my air, acting as if she had just won the lottery. Ryan stepped forward, placing a patronizing hand on the back of the sofa. The sofa I had spent weeks sourcing from Italy. "Listen, Natalie," he continued, adopting his best salesman voice. "I am not an unreasonable guy. I know this is a massive shock to you, so I am going to give you 48 hours to get your affairs in order." 48 hours for what exactly, I asked, keeping my voice dangerously quiet and perfectly level. "For you to get your things and get out," Ryan stated flatly, the fake patience evaporating into thin air. He pointed a rigid finger toward the sweeping mahogany staircase. "Go upstairs, pack your clothes, your shoes, and your makeup. Take whatever personal toiletries you need. But leave the rest. The furniture, the electronics, the artwork, the kitchenware, everything stays right where it is. Amber is moving in by Friday evening, and she really loves how this place is decorated. We are hosting a major cocktail party for some VIP clients this weekend to celebrate our new chapter, and I need the house looking exactly like this." The sheer audacity of his demand hung heavy in the room. He wanted to kick me out of my own sanctuary so his mistress could play the grand hostess, using my silver forks, sitting on my custom chairs, and sleeping in my premium bed. He felt entirely protected by a 5-year-old piece of paper that said his name was on the mortgage. He thought he held all the cards because he assumed I was just a naive, dependent wife who cared more about a broken heart than a bank account. But Ryan had a fatal flaw. He was so obsessed with the shell of the house that he completely forgot who put the soul inside it. He forgot that while he was out showing properties and sleeping with his assistant, I was running a highly lucrative corporate LLC. "Are you understanding me, Natalie?" Ryan snapped, misinterpreting my total silence for shock and submission. 48 hours. Do not try to take the television or the espresso machine out of spite. My security cameras are running 24/7. If you try to vandalize my property or steal my expensive appliances, I will call the police and have you arrested before you even reach the driveway. Just pack your bags and leave quietly. It is the dignified thing to do for everyone involved. Amber nodded eagerly, already tracing her fingers over the smooth surface of the dining table. I was thinking we could maybe change the curtains in the master bedroom, Ryan. She chirped, completely ignoring my presence as if I were already a ghost. Maybe something a bit lighter, something more airy to match my style. Whatever you want, babe, Ryan promised her, not taking his cold eyes off me. It is our house now. We can do whatever we want with it. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with a sudden icy calm. The pain of betrayal had burned out the moment I saw them walk through the front door together, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I picked up the sleek gold pen resting on the table. Without shedding a single tear, without offering a single word of argument or pleading, I signed my name on the dotted line of the divorce papers. I pushed the documents across the glass table toward him. He looked momentarily stunned by how easy that was. He had geared himself up for a screaming match, for begging for tears. When I offered nothing but a quick signature, a flicker of unease crossed his arrogant face, but it was quickly swallowed by his massive ego. I will be taking all my personal belongings with me, I said evenly, standing up and smoothing down my skirt, just like you asked. Good, Ryan sneered, recovering his bravado and crossing his arms. Glad we are on the same page. Be out by Thursday morning. I turned and walked toward the front door, leaving them standing in the center of the beautifully staged room. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me and claimed the ultimate prize. The drive away from the house was quiet. I did not turn on the radio. I just let the silence wrap around me, mapping out the logistics of the next 24 hours in my head. Ryan believed his prenuptial agreement was his impenetrable shield. He truly believed he had outsmarted me. But he failed to realize that the very foundation of his lifestyle was built on a contract he signed with my company 3 years ago. Ryan was about to learn a very expensive lesson in property law, corporate ownership, and the lethal consequences of underestimating a woman who knows exactly what she is worth. Before I tell you how I left him sleeping on bare concrete, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic partner who underestimated your worth. The sharp, relentless ringing of the doorbell shattered the quiet of the house at exactly 7 o'clock the next morning. I was standing in the kitchen nursing a black coffee, mentally reviewing the corporate contracts I had spent the entire night organizing. When I opened the heavy oak front door, I was greeted by the sight of my mother-in-law Barbara and my sister-in-law Keisha. Each of them was gripping a thick roll of heavy-duty black trash bags. Barbara pushed past me without a word, her expensive perfume instantly overpowering the smell of my brewing coffee. Keisha followed close behind, her expression guarded and severe. Keisha was married to Ryan's younger brother, David. She was a fiercely intelligent, pragmatic African-American woman who ran her own accounting firm. I had always respected her no-nonsense attitude, especially since she was the only person in the family who valued financial transparency. But right now her eyes were cold, locked onto me with a mixture of pity and absolute disdain. Barbara dropped her roll of trash bags onto the marble kitchen island with a loud, dismissive thud. I told Ryan this would happen, Barbara announced, turning to glare at me. I warned him 5 years ago that you were just a girl from a middle-class neighborhood who wanted a free ride. He has a brilliant career, Natalie. He sells million-dollar homes. And what do? You rearrange furniture for a living. He needed a partner who matched his status, not a charity case he had to support. Ryan wants you out today, and we are going to help you pack. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The sheer delusion in her voice was impressive. Barbara truly believed her son was a real estate prodigy who had elevated me from poverty. She had no idea that her precious son's entire brand was built on the back of my staging company. She had no idea that I lent him hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of inventory on credit, just so his listings would not look like empty boxes. Keisha stepped forward, crossing her arms over her chest. Let us just get this over with, Natalie, Keisha said, her voice sharp. Ryan called us last night in tears. He told us how much money you have been draining from his accounts to fund your little interior design hobby. He showed David the bank statements. We know he has been paying the mortgage, the utilities, and covering all the expenses while you lived the high life in this mansion. I raised an eyebrow, staring at Keisha. Ryan had manipulated them perfectly. He showed them the account that paid the mortgage, conveniently omitting the fact that I transferred my half of the expenses into that exact account every single month. He painted me as a financial parasite, knowing full well that Keisha despised anyone who took advantage of family. Ryan paid every bill in this house. Keisha continued, coldly stepping closer to me. You should be grateful he is not leaving you with his debt. You walked into this marriage with nothing, and you are leaving with exactly that. Pack your bags. We brought the trash bags. We will help you throw your stuff in the trunk of your car. But do not try to take anything else. Do not make this harder than it has to be, or David and I will make sure you face legal consequences. The irony was staggering. Keisha was threatening me with legal consequences, entirely unaware that the man she was defending was currently committing financial fraud against his own brother. I knew for a fact that Ryan had recently asked David and Keisha for $50,000, claiming it was for a joint real estate investment fund. I also knew he had taken that money and used it to buy his mistress a Porsche. Let them enjoy their righteous indignation. I placed my coffee mug gently on the counter. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice or defend myself. I simply walked over to the hallway closet and pulled out a single medium-sized suitcase I had packed hours ago. It contained my personal documents, my laptop, and a few changes of clothes. Barbara scoffed, looking at the solitary suitcase. Is that it? Did you hide the rest of your cheap clothes in the guest room? We are going to check every closet before you leave. Check wherever you want, Barbara, I replied evenly, pulling the handle of my suitcase up. I walked toward the front door, the wheels of my suitcase gliding silently over the custom hardwood floors I had paid to install. As I reached the entryway, I paused and turned back to look at them. Keisha was already unrolling a black trash bag, her jaw set tight. Pack carefully, Keisha, I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the tension in the room. I let my eyes drift over to the center of the living room, resting on the magnificent centerpiece of the space. But do not touch that $15,000 Italian leather sofa. It does not belong to your brother-in-law. Keisha froze the plastic bag, crinkling loudly in her hands. She frowned, her eyes darting from me to the sofa, clearly confused by the absolute certainty in my voice. Barbara rolled her eyes, muttering something about me being delusional. I did not wait for them to respond. I simply opened the heavy oak door, stepped out into the crisp morning air, and pulled the door shut behind me with a solid, satisfying click. I walked down the driveway to my car, leaving them locked inside a house that they believed was a fortress of Ryan's wealth. They thought they had successfully defended the family empire from a gold digger. They had no idea that I was not retreating. I was simply clearing the blast radius. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the neighborhood without looking back in the rearview mirror. Ryan wanted me out by Thursday. It was only Wednesday morning and I was already gone. But my absence was going to cost him a lot more than my presence ever did. The drive across town took exactly 22 minutes. My destination was not a tear-filled hotel room or a sympathetic friend's couch. I pulled my car through the heavy steel gates of a 50,000-square-foot climate-controlled facility located in the heart of the commercial district. The massive frosted glass letters above the main entrance read, Lux Interiors Limited Liability Company. It was the largest and most profitable luxury real estate staging firm in the state. I did not just work there. I built it from the ground up and I owned 100% of the shares. Ryan and his family loved to reduce my career to a little interior design hobby. They liked to imagine me fluffing pillows and picking out paint colors for modest suburban living rooms. The reality was much colder and infinitely more lucrative. I designed, installed, and leased high-end temporary environments for properties ranging from $2 million to $20 million. When a developer finished building a bare concrete mansion, my company came in and transformed it into a breathtaking lifestyle experience. We did not just provide sofas. We provided custom smart home integration, imported Italian marble dining sets, heavy crystal chandeliers, motorized window treatments, and automated climate control systems. I parked in my reserved spot and walked through the bustling loading dock. Dozens of workers were carefully wrapping velvet armchairs and loading them onto a fleet of pristine white box trucks. I bypassed the warehouse floor and headed straight up the metal stairs to my glass-enclosed corner office. My operations director, Greg, looked up from his dual monitors as I walked in. He immediately noticed the rigid set of my jaw. "Cancel my afternoon meetings, Greg," I said, tossing my keys onto the desk, "and pull the master file for the residential property on Oakwood Drive." Greg frowned, his fingers already flying across his keyboard. "Oakwood Drive, but that is your primary residence. Are we upgrading the master suite again?" "No," I replied, sitting down at my desk and booting up my computer. "We are executing a total repossession." Greg paused, his hands hovering over the keys. "A total repossession. Natalie, that house is fully loaded. We are talking over $300,000 worth of corporate inventory. Everything from the smart refrigerators to the custom acoustic paneling in the media room is coded to the company." "Exactly," I said. I unlocked my lower desk drawer and pulled out a thick, heavy red folder. I opened it and traced my finger down the dense legal text until I found the exact page I was looking for. There at the bottom of page 14 was Ryan's signature, dated 3 years ago. When Ryan and I moved into that house, it was just a dark, outdated shell. He had drained his savings to secure the mortgage on his precious premarital asset. He had absolutely no money left to furnish it. So I offered him a corporate solution. My company would completely outfit the property using our elite inventory. However, because I had investors and tax liabilities to consider at the time, we had to do it by the book. Ryan signed a standard corporate lease agreement acknowledging that the house itself belonged to him. But every single upgraded fixture, appliance, and piece of furniture remained the exclusive legal property of Lux Interiors. I slid the contract across the desk toward Greg. "Turn to Section 4, Paragraph B," I instructed. "The hostile repossession clause." Greg read the text aloud, his voice steady. "In the event of marital separation, divorce proceedings, or breach of good faith, the company reserves the absolute right to terminate this lease immediately. The company may repossess all listed assets within a 24-hour notice period without requiring court approval." Greg looked up, a slow understanding dawning in his eyes. He triggered the clause. "He handed me divorce papers this morning," I confirmed, my voice entirely devoid of emotion. "He also gave me 48 hours to pack my clothes and leave so he can move his assistant into the master bedroom by Friday. He specifically ordered me not to touch the furniture." Greg leaned back in his chair, letting out a low whistle. "He thinks he owns the staging." "He forgot who he married," I corrected. "I need our top team. I want the Alpha crew, 15 of our best movers, technicians, and electricians. And I need 3 of our largest 26-foot moving trucks fueled and ready in the loading bay by tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m. sharp." Greg did not ask any more questions. He operated on pure logistics. He picked up his radio, pressing the transmission button. "Dispatch, this is Greg. I need a priority Alpha team assembly in conference room 1 in 10 minutes. Clear the morning schedule for trucks 4, 7, and 9. We have a code red full-scale extraction." I stood up from my desk and walked over to the massive whiteboard covering the back wall of my office. I grabbed a black marker and began writing out the extraction plan. This was not a move. This was a tactical strike. We had to be fast, efficient, and legally untouchable. I listed the priority targets: the $10,000 smart thermostat system, the imported soaking tub that my plumbers had temporarily fitted into his master bath, the customized walk-in closet shelving, the automated blackout blinds, the commercial-grade kitchen appliances. Ryan thought he was evicting a helpless housewife. He was about to find out what happens when you try to steal from a corporate entity. The logistics were complex, but my crew was the best in the business. We routinely furnished entire mansions in a single day. Stripping one down to the bare drywall would take us less than 3 hours. Greg walked up behind me, looking at the extensive list on the whiteboard. "The police might show up, Natalie," he warned quietly. "If he claims you are robbing him, things could get complicated." I smiled, tapping the red folder on my desk. "Let him call them. I have his signature on a legally binding corporate document. This is not domestic theft. It is a civil asset recovery. We are simply recalling our inventory from a delinquent client." The Alpha crew assembled in the conference room 10 minutes later. They were a tough, highly trained group of professionals wearing our company uniforms. I stood at the head of the table, unrolling the floor plans of the Oakwood Drive house. Listen up, everyone. I addressed the room, my voice echoing against the glass walls. Tomorrow morning, we are executing a hostile repossession at my personal residence. You will treat this exactly like a corporate default. No hesitation and no talking to the occupants. We go in, we detach our assets, and we load the trucks. We do not leave a single light bulb that belongs to this company. Are we clear? A chorus of nods and affirmative responses swept through the room. I looked at the floor plans, tracing the perimeter of the house with my pen. Ryan wanted an empty house. He was going to get exactly that, down to the very last screw. At exactly 6 o'clock on Thursday morning, my convoy turned onto Oakwood Drive. As my lead truck rounded the final corner, the sprawling silhouette of my former home came into view. Through the iron gates, I saw the backyard. Ryan and Amber were already awake. They sat on patio furniture I had sourced from Milan. Amber wore a white silk robe, her hair perfectly styled. Ryan leaned back holding a champagne flute. They were toasting to their new life. They looked like the perfect image of stolen happiness. They were celebrating their victory in a castle built entirely on my credit. The tranquility of their morning was instantly shattered by the deafening roar of 3 heavy-duty commercial diesel engines. The lead driver threw the massive 26-foot box truck into reverse. The loud beeping of the backup alarm echoed like a military siren. The truck backed into the wide driveway. 2 more trucks parked along the curb. The massive vehicles dwarfed the house. The Lux Interiors logo painted on the trucks gleamed under the streetlights. Ryan bolted upright, spilling his mimosa. The crystal flute shattered against the stone patio. Amber shrieked, staring wide-eyed at the mechanical monsters invading their sanctuary. I stepped out of the lead truck onto the concrete driveway. I wore a tailored black blazer and professional slacks. I held a thick aluminum clipboard containing the executed repossession order. I was not here as a heartbroken wife. I was here as the chief executive officer of a corporation reclaiming its stolen assets. Behind me, the hydraulic lifts lowered simultaneously, hitting the pavement with a heavy thud. 15 men in black uniforms stepped out. They moved with precision, carrying heavy dollies and power drills. Ryan charged across the lawn, flushed with rage. "What the hell are you doing, Natalie?" he screamed. "You have absolutely no right to be here. I told you that you had until tomorrow to get your clothes." I stood perfectly still watching him. I did not raise my voice. I did not flinch. I tapped my pen against the aluminum clipboard. "I am not here for my clothes, Ryan," I replied clearly. "I am here for my corporate inventory." "Are you out of your mind?" Ryan shouted, stepping dangerously close to me. "This is my property. You are trespassing. I have the deed to this house. Get these trucks off my driveway or I am calling the police." "Call them," I challenged, maintaining direct, unblinking eye contact. "In fact, dial 911 right now. But while you are waiting for them to arrive, my crew has a job to do." Amber hovered behind Ryan, clutching her robe. "Natalie, please," she whined. "You are embarrassing yourself. You cannot just break into our house and steal things because you are jealous." I slowly shifted my gaze to Amber. "I am not breaking in, Amber," I stated coldly. "I am executing a legally binding repossession clause on a delinquent corporate account. Now step aside before you get run over by a dolly." I turned my attention to Greg. He stood at the head of the Alpha crew holding a power drill. The men were waiting silently for my command. The heavy front doors stood locked, but I knew the master access code. I had installed it. I stepped past Ryan, ignoring his frantic sputtering. I walked to the entryway and punched the code into the keypad. The heavy double doors clicked and swung open, revealing the magnificent, fully furnished interior. The crystal chandelier glittered softly in the foyer. I turned back to my crew, raising the clipboard in the air. "Boys, take it all," I commanded, my voice echoing through the open doorway. "Start with the kitchen." The crew surged forward like a well-oiled machine. It was a terrifyingly efficient display of coordinated power. Greg led the first squad straight into the house. Ryan tried to physically block the doorway, but 2 movers simply bypassed him. "Hey," Ryan yelled, grabbing the shoulder of one of the workers. "Do not touch that." The worker, A huge man named Derek paused and looked down at Ryan's hand. "Sir," the worker said in a deep, calm voice, "please remove your hand from my uniform. We are executing a corporate work order. If you interfere with our equipment, we will file assault charges." Ryan yanked his hand back as if he had been burned. He stood frozen in the entryway, overwhelmed by the men pouring inside. The Alpha crew did not hesitate. The second squad headed straight for the custom kitchen. Within seconds, the loud, aggressive whirring of power drills filled the air. Amber screamed as a worker lifted the espresso machine off the counter and placed it onto a cart. Two men were underneath the kitchen island, unbolting the brackets holding the smart appliances. Another worker rapidly unscrewed the hinges of the cabinet doors, tossing them onto a rack. It was a calculated invasion. They were not packing boxes. They were dissecting the house. Ryan stood paralyzed by shock. His smug celebration and the illusion of his wealth were being dismantled piece by piece, right in front of his eyes. And the sun had not even fully risen. They removed the very soul of the space. The large Italian leather sofa that Keisha had tried to claim was effortlessly hoisted into the air by three men and carried out the front door. They marched past Ryan, ignoring his existence. Amber fell to her knees, weeping loudly, as her perfect morning was reduced to absolute chaos. She watched helplessly while another team began dismantling the custom floating shelves in the adjacent dining room. The expensive art pieces I had curated from local galleries were meticulously wrapped in thick protective blankets and loaded onto rolling carts. This was not merely a repossession. This was an utter erasure of the life he thought he owned. I stood by the entryway, watching my crew execute the vision with flawless precision. Amber had retreated to the dining room, clutching her silk robe tight against her chest as if the fabric could protect her from the reality crashing down around her. She slumped into one of the velvet dining chairs, resting her head on the massive imported marble dining table. It was the same table she had just told Ryan she wanted to host her VIP cocktail party at. But her moment of dramatic despair was violently interrupted. Four of my strongest crew members marched into the dining room. One of them tapped the back of the chair she was sitting in. "Excuse me, Mom, we need the chair," he said politely but firmly. Amber gasped, leaping up as if the velvet had burned her. Before she could even articulate a complaint, the four men positioned themselves at the corners of the heavy marble table. On three, the lead mover called out, "1, 2, 3. The men hoisted the massive slab of marble right out from under her. Amber shrieked, stumbling backward into the bare wall as they swiftly maneuvered the heavy table out of the room. The luxurious dining space was instantly transformed into an echoing, empty rectangle. Over in the kitchen, the deconstruction was escalating. The loud mechanical whine of power tools echoed through the open floor plan. Greg was personally supervising the removal of the smart refrigerator. It was a $12,000 appliance fully integrated into the cabinetry. Ryan watched in absolute horror as two technicians disconnected the water lines and effortlessly slid the massive stainless steel unit onto a heavy-duty dolly. "Wait," Ryan stammered, his voice cracking. "All our groceries are in there." Greg did not even look up from his clipboard. He simply waved a hand. Another worker pulled open the sleek refrigerator doors and began tossing expensive organic produce, artisanal cheeses, and half-empty bottles of imported wine into cheap cardboard boxes. They dumped the boxes onto the bare hardwood floor. The precious groceries piled up in a sad heap next to the wall. "It is not just the furniture," Ryan Amber wailed, pointing frantically toward the center of the kitchen. "They are taking the island." It was true. The custom-built 10-foot kitchen island was not a permanent fixture. It was a modular, high-end staging unit designed to look built-in. My crew had already removed the quartz countertop and were now dismantling the base cabinets. The heart of the home was being erased. The espresso machine, the wine cooler, the built-in microwave, all vanished into the back of the white box trucks parked outside. Then the lights began to go out. Two electricians dragged a tall ladder into the grand foyer, right past where Ryan was standing. They climbed up and began unhooking the magnificent cascading crystal chandelier that hung from the 20-foot ceiling. The heavy glass prisms clinked together like wind chimes as they lowered it down. The hallway plunged into shadows. They moved to the living room, taking the designer pendant lights and the automated blackout blinds. The house was literally being stripped down to its bare drywall and exposed electrical wires. It looked like a construction zone. Ryan's face flushed a deep, dangerous shade of crimson. His massive ego was fracturing under the weight of his utter powerlessness. He had always relied on the illusion of wealth to control people. Now I was dismantling his illusion piece by piece in front of his new girlfriend and my entire staff. He could not handle the humiliation. He snapped. As a young worker walked past him carrying a stack of automated smart thermostats, Ryan lunged forward. "Put those down!" Ryan roared. He grabbed the worker tightly by the collar of his uniform shirt, yanking him backward. The young man stumbled, dropping the expensive digital thermostats onto the floor. They cracked loudly against the wood. The entire house went dead silent. The power drills stopped. The heavy footsteps ceased. The Alpha crew dropped what they were doing and turned toward Ryan. 15 men closed in, forming a tight circle around him. Greg stepped forward, his face stony and hard. "Let him go!" Greg ordered, his voice low and dangerous. Ryan was breathing heavily, his grip still tight on the young worker. "This is my house," Ryan spat, though his eyes darted nervously around the circle of men. "You are stealing my property. I am not letting you take another thing out of this building." I walked slowly into the center of the room, my heels clicking sharply against the bare floorboards. The men parted to let me through. I stopped a few feet away from Ryan, holding my clipboard casually at my side. "Release my employee." "Ryan," I said, my voice ice cold. "You cannot do this, Natalie." Ryan yelled, his voice echoing in the empty space. "You are ruining my life." "You ruined your own life," I corrected smoothly. "You signed a legal contract. Section 4, paragraph B gives my corporation the absolute right to secure its assets. You are assaulting an employee and destroying corporate property." I pointed at the cracked thermostats. "That is $3,000 in damages. Release him right now, or I will let Greg handle you before I press felony assault charges." Ryan looked at Greg, who cracked his knuckles menacingly. Ryan's bravado completely collapsed. He slowly uncurled his fingers, letting go of the young worker. The worker quickly stepped back, adjusting his collar. "Clean up the broken units, Greg," I instructed, without taking my eyes off Ryan. "Add the damages to his final invoice. And keep moving. We are on a tight schedule." The crew immediately resumed their rapid deconstruction. The mechanical noise started up again, drowning out Amber's quiet sobbing from the corner of the room. Ryan stood frozen in the center of the living room, utterly defeated. The magnificent million-dollar aesthetic that Ryan used to seduce clients and mistresses had been completely eradicated. He was standing in an empty, echoing concrete box, and he finally realized he had absolutely no power left to stop me. Ryan reached into his pocket with trembling hands and pulled out his cell phone. His face was pale and his chest heaved as he frantically punched the screen. He was cornered, and the only weapon he had left was the authorities. I watched him press the phone to his ear, his eyes locked onto me with pure venom. "Hello, 911, he shouted, his voice echoing off the bare walls of the living room. "Yes, I need police at my residence immediately. My soon-to-be ex-wife has lost her mind. She broke into my house with a gang of men, and they are robbing me blind. They are literally stripping my house to the studs. Yes, there are 15 of them. They are aggressive, and I fear for my safety. Send squad cars right now." He ended the call and pointed the phone at me like a loaded gun. "They are coming for you, Natalie. You are going to jail. You and your entire crew of thugs are going to be arrested for grand larceny and breaking and entering." I did not even blink. I simply turned my attention back to Greg, who was directing 2 workers to carry out the custom-built wine cooler from the pantry. "Keep the pace steady, Greg," I instructed, ignoring the furious man screaming behind me. "Make sure the fragile items are strapped tightly in truck number 2. The crew moved with the exact same robotic efficiency as before, completely unbothered by the threat of law enforcement. We operated strictly by the book, and every single employee here knew that my legal documentation was bulletproof. Amber, on the other hand, was having a complete theatrical meltdown. She had moved from the dining room and was now pacing near the front door, her silk robe fluttering around her legs. She was sobbing loudly, wiping mascara-smeared tears from her cheeks. "This is a nightmare," she wailed, looking at Ryan. "My beautiful house is gone. What are we going to do, Ryan?" He rushed over to her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders and glaring at me. "Do not worry, babe," he whispered loudly enough for me to hear. "She is going to rot in a holding cell tonight, and I am going to sue her company into bankruptcy." I stepped out onto the front porch to check the loading progress on the box trucks. The morning sun was fully up now, casting bright light across the manicured lawns of Oakwood Drive. The aggressive noise of our power tools and the sight of massive commercial trucks blocking the street had not gone unnoticed. Doors were opening up and down the block. Neighbors I had politely waved to for the past 3 years were stepping out onto their driveways in their bathrobes holding coffee mugs. Mrs. Henderson from next door was standing by her mailbox, staring openly at the spectacle. Ryan always bragged about his pristine reputation in this wealthy gated community. Now his neighbors were getting a front row seat to his absolute public humiliation. A team of my movers walked right past Mrs. Henderson, carrying the massive king-sized mattress from the master bedroom, the very bed Ryan had planned to share with his mistress tonight. The distant wail of sirens pierced the crisp morning air. The sound grew rapidly louder, bouncing off the expensive facades of the neighborhood homes. 2 black and white police cruisers turned the corner at high speed, their red and blue lights flashing aggressively. They swerved into the cul-de-sac and aggressively parked their vehicles at an angle, completely blocking my 3-box trucks from leaving the driveway. The doors of the cruisers flew open and 4 police officers stepped out. They moved with urgency, their hands resting cautiously near their utility belts. This was a wealthy neighborhood, and a call about 15 men breaking into a $1 million home was treated as a high-priority emergency. Ryan burst out the front door, dragging Amber by the hand. "Officers," he yelled, waving his arms frantically. "Over here! Thank God you are here! Arrest her right now!" He pointed directly at me as I stood calmly on the top step of the porch. "She organized this entire invasion. She is having these men steal hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of my property." The lead officer, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stern expression, marched up the driveway. His eyes scanned the chaotic scene, assessing the massive box trucks, the men in black uniforms, and the empty, echoing house behind us. He stopped at the base of the porch steps, resting his hand firmly on his radio. "Everyone freeze!" the officer commanded in a booming voice that cut through the noise of the idling diesel engines. "Shut down the tools and step away from the vehicles." Greg immediately lowered his clipboard and signaled for the Alpha crew to stand down. The power drills powered off. The men stopped moving and placed their hands in plain sight. They were professionals, and they knew exactly how to handle law enforcement in tense situations like this. Amber saw her opportunity to escalate the drama and threw herself forward. She stumbled down the porch steps, stopping just short of the lead officer. "Officer, you have to help us," she cried, her voice shaking with perfectly manufactured terror. "We were just having a peaceful morning and she broke in. She brought all these huge men and they are tearing our home apart. I am so scared. They practically pushed me out of my chair. Please do not let them hurt us." Ryan stepped up beside her, putting a protective arm around her waist, acting the part of the valiant defender. "She is unhinged, officer," Ryan stated, his voice trembling with fake emotion. "She just found out we are getting a divorce and she snapped. This is a domestic dispute that turned into a massive home invasion. I want her in handcuffs immediately." The lead officer turned his stern gaze up toward me. He looked at my tailored blazer, my calm posture, and the aluminum clipboard resting against my hip. "Ma'am," the officer said, his tone sharp and authoritative, Step down here right now. You are ordering these men to remove property from this residence without a court-ordered eviction notice. That constitutes burglary and trespassing. If you cannot provide an immediate legal justification for this intrusion, I am placing you under arrest and impounding every single one of these commercial trucks." The neighbors watched in breathless silence. The flashing lights of the police cruisers illuminated the driveway in alternating red and blue. Ryan smirked at me, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. He was absolutely certain he had won. He thought the law was his ultimate shield, and that he was about to watch me get shoved into the back of a police car in front of the entire neighborhood. He had no idea I held the one piece of paper that would turn his entire world upside down. I stepped down the wooden porch stairs, moving with a slow, deliberate grace. I did not raise my hands in the air. I did not frantically try to explain myself the way a guilty person would. I simply walked directly toward the lead officer, the heels of my shoes clicking against the concrete driveway. Ryan sneered, crossing his arms over his chest as if he was already picturing me in an orange jumpsuit. "You are done, Natalie," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. "Tell it to the judge." I ignored him completely. I stopped 2 feet in front of the tall officer and calmly extended the thick aluminum clipboard toward him. "Officer, I understand why my soon-to-be ex-husband is confused," I said, maintaining a perfectly even tone. "He believes he is the victim of a home invasion. However, what you are looking at is not a burglary, it is a corporate asset recovery." The officer frowned, looking from my face down to the clipboard. He did not reach for his handcuffs, which visibly disappointed Ryan. The officer took the clipboard and flipped open the heavy metal cover. Inside was a certified red folder stamped with the official seal of Lux Interiors Limited Liability Company. "Read it carefully, officer," I instructed politely. "You will find the original staging lease signed 3 years ago by the homeowner Ryan. It clearly stipulates that while he holds the deed to the physical structure of the house, every single piece of furniture, every smart appliance, the customized lighting fixtures, and even the automated window treatments belong exclusively to my corporation. We retain full legal ownership of the interior assets." Ryan let out a loud, dramatic scoff. "She is lying, officer. She is delusional. It is just some fake paper she printed out this morning. I bought this house. It is mine. Arrest her." The officer did not look up. His eyes tracked across the dense legal paragraphs, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the airtight language of the contract. He flipped to the second page, his finger tracing the bolded section detailing the termination terms. "If you direct your attention to Section 4, Paragraph B," I continued, my voice projecting clearly so the neighbors could hear every word. "You will see the hostile repossession clause. It states that in the event of a marital separation, divorce proceedings, or a breach of good faith, the corporation has the absolute legal right to terminate the lease immediately. We are granted full authorization to execute a repossession of all listed corporate assets within a 24-hour window without any prior court approval. Ryan served me with divorce papers yesterday morning. He initiated separation. My company is simply enforcing the contract he signed." The officer spent another full minute reading the document, verifying the notarized signatures and the attached itemized inventory list. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the glossy pages. Ryan shifted his weight nervously, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Amber stopped her fake crying and peeked out from behind Ryan's shoulder, her face pale. Finally, the officer snapped the clipboard shut. He handed it back to me with a sharp nod. "Everything appears to be in order, ma'am," the officer said, his tone entirely transformed. He turned his imposing frame toward Ryan. His expression was no longer sympathetic. It was stern and deeply annoyed. "Sir," the officer barked, addressing Ryan directly, "this is a civil matter. It is not a criminal offense. She has legal documentation proving that her company owns the property currently being removed from the premises." Ryan's jaw dropped. "What?" he sputtered, stepping forward. "No, that is impossible. You cannot just let her gut my house. You are the police. Stop them." "I am a police officer, not a civil court judge," the lead officer replied, his voice turning hard. "But I can read a legally binding contract. You signed an agreement giving her company the right to take their inventory back. She is not stealing your property, sir. She is taking back hers. You need to stand down immediately. But she is taking my refrigerator, Ryan yelled, his voice cracking with panic. She is taking the toilets. I live here. Then you should have read the fine print before you signed away the rights to your appliances, the officer countered bluntly. If you have a problem with this repossession, you can take it up with a civil attorney during business hours. But right now, my officers and I are not going to interfere with a lawful corporate operation. And if you attempt to physically assault another one of her workers, I will be putting you in the back of my cruiser for battery. Do you understand me? Ryan stood completely paralyzed. The arrogant smirk had vanished completely, replaced by a look of sheer unadulterated horror. He looked around wildly, realizing that his ultimate weapon, the police, had just turned against him. Amber let out a loud, humiliating wail, covering her face with her hands. The dramatic rescue she had anticipated had evaporated into thin air. Out on the street, the neighbors began to whisper among themselves. Mrs. Henderson leaned over her mailbox, shaking her head in disgust. The pristine reputation Ryan had cultivated, the image of the wealthy, successful real estate broker, was crumbling into dust right on his front lawn. Everyone was watching him get publicly dressed down by law enforcement over unpaid furniture. He was exposed as a fraud living in a borrowed castle. I turned back to Greg, who was standing by the porch holding his power drill. "You heard the officer, Greg?" I called out, breaking the heavy silence. "We are cleared to proceed. Let us finish the primary suite and wrap this up." Greg grinned a sharp, satisfied smile. "Copy that, boss," he replied. He raised his radio to his mouth. "Alpha Team, the police have cleared the scene. Resume operations. Take the master bath down to the plumbing." The heavy mechanical noise instantly roared back to life, echoing through the neighborhood. The workers moved with renewed vigor, carrying out mirrors, rugs, and bedside tables. The police officers walked back to their cruisers, turning off their flashing lights, but keeping their vehicles parked at the end of the driveway to monitor the situation and ensure Ryan did not try anything stupid. Ryan stumbled backwards, sinking onto the bottom step of the concrete porch. He put his head in his hands, his tailored suit wrinkling as he collapsed under the weight of his public humiliation. He had tried to use the law to destroy me, but I had used the law to systematically dismantle his entire reality. I did not say another word to him. I just stood firmly on the driveway, watching my massive fleet of trucks slowly fill up with the remnants of his shattered ego. The massive rear doors of truck number 3 slammed shut with a heavy metallic boom. Greg locked the steel latch and gave me a sharp nod, indicating that the extraction was officially complete. The 3 massive diesel engines roared simultaneously, sending a thick vibration through the concrete driveway. The police officers silently returned to their cruisers, reversed out of the cul-de-sac, and drove off down the street. The nosy neighbors continued to linger on their lawns, murmuring and pointing fingers at the spectacle unfolding before their very eyes. Ryan was now completely isolated, surrounded only by intense judgment and the physical wreckage of his pride. I turned away from the pitiful sight of Ryan sitting on his porch steps and walked to my car. I slipped into the driver's seat and started the engine. Through my windshield, I watched Amber finally peel her hands away from her tear-streaked face. She looked completely hollow as she slowly stood up and wandered through the open doorway of the house. I shifted my car into drive, but kept my foot resting heavily on the brake pedal, watching the glorious aftermath of my morning operation unfold. Amber stepped into the grand foyer, and her agonizing scream echoed loudly enough to pierce right through the insulated glass of my car windows. The interior of the house was completely unrecognizable from the luxurious sanctuary they had been celebrating just an hour ago. My crew had not just taken the furniture. They had surgically extracted every single ounce of comfort from the structure. The hardwood floors were dusty and completely bare. Thick black wires dangled helplessly from the high ceilings where my imported crystal chandeliers used to hang. The walls, once adorned with expensive original art pieces, were now marked only by empty nail holes and faded squares of paint. I watched through the large front windows as Amber ran frantically into the kitchen. slipping slightly in her silk robe on the bare floorboards. The space where the massive custom-built island used to sit was just an empty rectangular scar on the wood. She yanked open the door to the walk-in pantry, only to find that the automated lighting and the customized shelving units were completely gone. She ran out of my line of sight, heading toward the master suite, but I knew exactly what she was finding back there. My crew had removed the high-end Japanese bidet toilet seats, leaving only cold, hard porcelain bowls. Even the sleek, smart shower heads had been unbolted from the tiled walls. There was absolutely no hot water flowing through the pipes because the digital control panel for the boiler had belonged to my company, and my technicians had bypassed it upon exit. The house was nothing more than a dark, hollow, echoing cave. A few seconds later, Amber reappeared in the living room, entirely hysterical. Ryan scrambled up from the porch steps and ran inside after her. The sheer emptiness of the massive room swallowed his footsteps, making him look incredibly small. He looked around wildly, his chest heaving under his tailored shirt. He had absolutely nothing left to offer her. No imported espresso machine to make her a calming drink. No velvet sofa for her to collapse onto. Not even a simple wall mirror for her to check her ruined makeup. Amber spun around and hit him directly in the chest with her fists. "You ruined everything!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with pure outrage. "Where are we supposed to sleep tonight, Ryan? On the floor. I cannot live like this. This is an absolute nightmare." Ryan grabbed her wrists roughly, his face twisting into a mask of desperate panic. His massive ego was bleeding out rapidly on the bare floorboards, and he needed to stop the bleeding immediately before she abandoned him. He looked out the open front door, making direct eye contact with me as my car continued to idle at the end of his driveway. He needed a lifeline to survive this crushing humiliation. He found it in the only thing he thought he still completely controlled: his prestigious real estate career. Ryan dragged Amber out onto the concrete porch, pointing a shaking, aggressive finger at my car. "Keep this garbage!" he screamed, his voice entirely unhinged and desperate. "You hear me, Natalie? Keep all this used junk. I do not need it, and I certainly do not need you. I am the top luxury broker in this entire city. Do you have any idea what I am doing this afternoon? I am hosting an exclusive open house for a pristine $5 million estate in the hills. My commission on that single sale is going to be over $150,000. I am going to take that cash and buy brand new custom furniture. Better than your cheap corporate trash. I will buy Amber a diamond necklace and a brand new car. You think stripping this house makes me poor? You are pathetic. I am Ryan Davis. I generate massive wealth. You just decorate it." I rested my hand casually on the smooth leather steering wheel, watching his pathetic display of bravado unfold. He was a broken man, standing in a freezing empty box, shouting aggressively about imaginary millions to a selfish mistress who was already looking at him like he was a complete stranger. He truly thought his real estate career was his ultimate, unbreakable safety net. He actually believed his highly anticipated $5 million open house was going to instantly save him from this absolute financial and personal disaster. He was trying to use his professional reputation as a shield against my retaliation. I smiled slightly, reaching over and rolling up my heavily tinted window, blocking out the sound of his frantic shouting. I pressed my foot down firmly on the gas pedal and drove away, leaving them completely alone in the cold, hollow, echoing shell of his precious premarital asset. I pulled out of the quiet cul-de-sac of Oakwood Drive, leaving my ruined marriage in the rearview mirror. The morning traffic was just beginning to build as I merged onto the highway, but my mind was completely clear. Ryan had always possessed a profound talent for digging his own grave, but his arrogant outburst on the porch was a masterpiece of self-destruction. He actually believed his upcoming $5 million open house was his ultimate trump card. He thought he could use that massive commission check to replace everything I had just legally repossessed. But his raging ego had completely blinded him to the structural reality of his own career. Ryan did not sell empty houses. He lacked the vision and the charisma to convince wealthy buyers to drop millions on bare walls and cold floors. His entire brand as a luxury real estate broker relied entirely on selling a highly curated lifestyle. A lifestyle that I created, funded, and installed for him. I reached over and tapped the Bluetooth icon on my dashboard screen. The call routed directly to the cab of truck number 1. Greg answered on the second ring, the loud hum of the diesel engine roaring in the background. "Operation Oakwood is complete, boss," Greg announced, his voice crackling slightly over the speakers. "We are merging onto the interstate now and heading back to the warehouse to unload the residential inventory. Change of plans." "Greg," I instructed, keeping my eyes on the road. "Reroute the fleet. Do not go back to the warehouse yet." Greg paused. "Reroute where?" I smiled, gripping the steering wheel. "I need you to pull up Ryan's corporate account on your tablet. Look at his outstanding accounts receivable." I heard the sound of Greg tapping on his screen. "All right, I have his file open. Let us see here. He has 3 active luxury listings currently staged by us. He has been dodging the invoices for months. He is currently operating on a massive staging credit because you approved the extension as his wife. Total outstanding balance across all 3 properties is exactly $150,000. He has completely defaulted on his net 30 terms." "Exactly," I said, my voice hardening into a purely professional tone. "He just reminded me that he is hosting an exclusive open house for the $5 million property up on Summit Ridge this afternoon. He is expecting to land a massive commission today. He thinks that money is going to save him." Greg let out a low chuckle. "Summit Ridge. That is a massive property, Natalie. We installed our premium platinum tier inventory in that house. We are talking imported Italian leather sectionals, grand pianos, original oil paintings, and a fully integrated outdoor kitchen setup. We have over $200,000 of corporate assets sitting inside that mansion right now. And he has not paid a single dime for the lease," I confirmed. "He is in clear violation of our commercial staging agreement. If he wants to threaten me with his wealth, he is going to learn exactly where that wealth comes from. I want to execute a commercial asset recovery immediately." Greg whistled through his teeth. "You want to hit the Summit Ridge property right now, today." "I want it stripped to the floorboards, Greg," I commanded. "He is expecting his VIP clients to walk through the doors at 2 o'clock this afternoon. I want every piece of furniture, every rug, every painting, and every decorative pillow loaded into those box trucks. Target the $5 million property. Pull it all before 1 o'clock this afternoon. Leave absolutely nothing behind but the dust." I can hear the grin in Greg's voice. "Consider it done, boss. I am signaling trucks 2 and 3 to take the next exit. We are heading straight up into the hills. Do we have the access codes for the security gates?" "I am the one who staged it," I reminded him. "I have the master lockbox codes and the security bypass clearance. I am sending them to your tablet right now. You are fully authorized to enter the premises. If the listing agent from his brokerage tries to stop you, show them the commercial default notice. I am heading to the office right now to draft the legal paperwork. I will email the official breach of contract notice to his managing broker the second you breach the front doors." "Copy that, Natalie. We will be on site in 20 minutes. The Alpha crew is going to love this. They are already fired up from the residential job. We will have that mansion completely gutted before he even finishes his morning coffee." I ended the call and let out a long, slow breath. The morning sun was shining brightly over the city skyline, reflecting off the glass facades of the downtown skyscrapers. Ryan thought our battle was a simple domestic dispute over who got to keep the nice sofa. He failed to comprehend that I was not just his wife. I was his largest corporate creditor. I held the keys to his entire professional existence. Every successful open house he ever hosted was an illusion crafted by my company. He sold the ambiance, the warmth, and the aesthetic that I painstakingly designed. Without my staging, his $5 million listings were just echoing empty boxes with terrible acoustics. I remembered attending corporate galas with him where he would stand around with his wealthy colleagues drinking expensive scotch and taking full credit for the breathtaking interiors of his properties. He never once mentioned my firm. He let his colleagues and his starry-eyed assistant Amber believe he possessed some magical touch for real estate. He let everyone assume he was a self-made genius who single-handedly dominated the luxury market. It was a pathetic charade built entirely on my silent labor. He had manipulated his family into believing I was a gold digger draining his accounts. He had convinced Keisha and Barbara that I was living off his hard work. But the truth was buried in those unpaid invoices. I was the silent bankroll funding his arrogant playboy lifestyle. I was the invisible architect of his success. And now the architect was tearing down the building. I merged onto the off-ramp, heading toward the commercial district where my corporate office was located. I needed to draft a massive neon legal notice to tape to the front door of that Summit Ridge mansion. A warning to every potential buyer and every competing real estate agent who walked up to that house today. Ryan was about to walk into the most important showing of his career entirely blind. He was going to open those double mahogany doors expecting to impress a tech billionaire with my luxurious designs. Instead, he was going to walk into a devastating professional trap. He was going to lose his commission, his reputation, and his dignity in one single catastrophic moment. The domestic war was officially over. The corporate slaughter was just beginning. I pressed the accelerator, driving forward into a completely new chapter of my life with absolute unstoppable confidence. I pulled my own car into the private underground parking garage of my corporate headquarters, just as the digital clock on my dashboard struck 1:15 in the afternoon. The drive had given me plenty of time to orchestrate the final details of my commercial counterstrike. I rode the glass elevator up to the executive suite, stepping into the cool, quiet environment of my office. I did not bother taking off my blazer or fetching a coffee. I walked straight over to my desk, booted up my primary monitor, and accessed the integrated smart home security network for the Summit Ridge property. Since my company had installed the temporary smart thermostats, doorbell cameras, and security hubs for the staging process, I maintained full remote administrative access. I clicked on the high-definition live feed for the driveway and the front porch. I leaned back in my leather ergonomic chair, sipping a fresh glass of iced water, ready to watch the live broadcast of my husband's professional execution. At exactly 1:30, Ryan's black-leased Mercedes sedan pulled smoothly into the circular cobblestone driveway of the $5 million estate. The Summit Ridge property was an architectural masterpiece of modern glass and concrete perched high on a cliff overlooking the entire city. It was the crown jewel of his brokerage portfolio and his absolute pride and joy. Ryan stepped out of the driver's side wearing a brand new tailored navy suit. He had clearly gone home showered in his cold, empty bathroom and changed his clothes to wash off the humiliating stench of the morning repossession. Amber emerged from the passenger side wearing a sleek designer cocktail dress and holding a branded leather portfolio. She was trying desperately to play the role of the sophisticated real estate assistant, but she looked incredibly nervous. She kept glancing around the massive property as if expecting my commercial moving trucks to suddenly appear from behind the manicured hedges to ruin her afternoon. Ryan walked around the front of the car and grabbed Amber's hand, pulling her close. I could not hear their conversation, but the high-definition camera captured his body language perfectly. He was puffed up with arrogant confidence. He swept his arm toward the massive mansion, gesturing to the breathtaking facade and the dramatic infinity pool reflecting the afternoon sun. He was clearly giving her an energetic pep talk, assuring her that this was their real domain. The empty house on Oakwood Drive was just a minor temporary setback caused by a bitter ex-wife. This $5 million listing was his true arena. He believed he was an untouchable apex predator in the luxury real estate market. The commission on this single massive sale would be enough to replace everything I had taken away. He would buy new designer furniture, secure a luxury penthouse for their transition, and keep his inflated playboy lifestyle completely afloat. His entire future hinged completely on closing this one deal today. The client they were waiting for was not just an average wealthy home buyer. He was a notorious tech billionaire from Silicon Valley who had recently relocated his corporate headquarters to our city. This buyer was famous in the local real estate community for being incredibly demanding, impatient, and obsessed with turnkey properties. He did not want to hire interior designers or wait months for custom furniture shipments. He wanted to walk into a breathtaking, fully furnished home, stroke a massive cashier check, and start living the billionaire lifestyle that very same night. That was exactly why Ryan had begged me to install our highest tier platinum staging package at this specific property. I had curated over $200,000 of elite inventory for this house, including original oil paintings, a grand piano, and a custom-built outdoor entertainment center. Ryan was banking his entire career on my eye for design to close this difficult tech mogul. At 1:45, a sleek silver Maybach, flanked by two heavy black luxury SUVs, glided up the winding mountain road and pulled into the driveway, right behind Ryan's Mercedes. Ryan immediately straightened his tie, flashing his signature million-dollar salesman smile. Amber stood rigidly beside him, clutching her portfolio tight against her chest, trying to look professional. The rear door of the Maybach opened, and the tech billionaire stepped out, accompanied by two men who were clearly his private security detail. The billionaire wore a casual but obscenely expensive cashmere sweater and dark sunglasses, looking completely unbothered by the stunning world around him. Ryan rushed forward, extending his hand with practiced enthusiasm. Through the camera feed, I watched Ryan deliver his slick introductory pitch. He was pointing at the modern architecture, highlighting the panoramic city views, and completely laying on the heavy charm. The billionaire gave a brief, indifferent nod, clearly wanting to cut the meaningless small talk and see the luxurious interior. Ryan gestured grandly toward the massive double mahogany doors at the main entrance of the estate. He placed his hand on the small of Amber's back, guiding her forward as they led the billionaire and his security detail up the wide, floating concrete steps. Ryan was completely in his element. He was practically vibrating with the intense anticipation of the massive commission check he believed was just minutes away from landing in his bank account. He was oblivious to the fact that his entire professional world had already been thoroughly gutted by my alpha crew. As they reached the top of the stairs and approached the wide, shadowed entryway, Ryan reached into his tailored pocket for the heavy brass key. He turned around to face the billionaire, flashing one final charismatic smile, ready to deliver his perfectly rehearsed speech about the breathtaking open-concept living space waiting just beyond the threshold. He had absolutely no idea what was waiting for him behind those doors. Ryan pushed the heavy mahogany doors inward with a confident flourish. "Welcome to Summit Ridge, gentlemen," he announced, his voice practically dripping with practiced charm. "Prepare to experience the absolute pinnacle of modern luxury living." He stepped aside, sweeping his arm toward the grand interior, expecting the billionaire to be instantly captivated by the sophisticated aesthetic I had painstakingly created. But instead of the warm, inviting glow of custom lighting and the rich texture of imported Italian leather, the only thing that greeted them was a cold, hollow silence. The massive open-concept living space was completely empty. I watched the camera feed as Ryan froze mid-gesture. His smile vanished instantly, replaced by sheer incomprehension. The space was so vast that the doors opening echoed against the bare concrete floors. My alpha crew had executed their job flawlessly. They had removed the magnificent grand piano that used to anchor the living room. They had taken down the heavy velvet drapery, leaving the massive floor-to-ceiling windows stark and blindingly bright. They had even stripped the custom outdoor entertainment center from the patio, leaving only the bare stone decking by the infinity pool. There was absolutely nothing left to sell the illusion. The billionaire stepped over the threshold, his expensive leather shoes clicking loudly in the cavernous space. He stopped dead in his tracks, his brow furrowing behind his dark sunglasses. He looked at the vast, empty room, then turned his head to look at Ryan. "I thought you said this property was fully turnkey," the billionaire stated, his tone flat and heavily laced with irritation. "I was told I could move in tonight. Where is the furniture? Where is the design you pitched to my team?" Ryan stammered, his face draining of all color. "I do not understand." He choked out, his eyes darting wildly around the empty room, as if hoping the $200,000 worth of staging was simply hiding behind a corner. "There must be some kind of mistake. My staging company was supposed to have everything set up." They were just here. It was fully furnished yesterday. Amber stood trembling by the doorway, clutching her branded portfolio so tightly her knuckles turned white. She knew exactly what had happened. She had witnessed the exact same surgical extraction just a few hours ago at the Oakwood house. One of the billionaire's security guards stepped forward, pointing a thick finger at the glass panel adjacent to the front door. "Sir," the guard said, addressing his boss, "you might want to read this." Taped securely to the glass right at eye level was the massive neon orange legal notice I had drafted in my office. It was impossible to miss. The tech billionaire stepped closer to the window, pulling his sunglasses down the bridge of his nose. He read the bold black lettering out loud, his voice echoing sharply in the empty mansion. Official notice of commercial asset repossession. All interior staging and luxury assets have been legally seized by Lux Interiors, Limited Liability Company, due to the listing agent's severe default and non-payment of $150,000 in outstanding commercial debt. This property is no longer serviced by our firm. The billionaire finished reading and turned slowly back to Ryan. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ryan looked like he was going to vomit. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The sophisticated, wealthy image he had projected just 3 minutes ago was completely annihilated. He was exposed not just as a liar, but as a broke, delinquent fraud who could not even afford to pay his own vendors. "I do not do business with amateurs," the billionaire said, his voice dripping with absolute disgust. He did not yell. He did not throw a tantrum. His quiet contempt was infinitely more damaging. "I am looking to drop $5 million today, and you bring me to a repossessed empty box because you cannot pay your bills. You are a complete waste of my time." He turned on his heel and walked straight out the front door without a single backward glance. His security detail followed closely behind him. "Wait, sir," Ryan pleaded, his voice cracking with sheer desperation. He chased after them down the concrete steps. "Please let me explain. I can fix this. I can have the house fully furnished by tomorrow morning. I promise you." The billionaire ignored him completely. He slid into the back seat of the silver Maybach, and the heavy door slammed shut with a finality that signaled the absolute end of Ryan's career. The luxurious convoy of vehicles pulled smoothly out of the cobblestone driveway, leaving Ryan standing alone in the afternoon sun. He had just lost a $150,000 commission in less than 5 seconds. The financial lifeline he desperately needed to survive the divorce and maintain his fake lifestyle was gone forever. Back inside the empty entryway, Amber dropped her leather portfolio onto the bare concrete floor. The loud slap echoed through the hollow house. She covered her face with her hands and burst into loud, hysterical tears of pure embarrassment. She had wanted to play the role of the glamorous real estate partner, rubbing shoulders with tech billionaires and elite society. Instead, she was standing in a gutted house legally branded as the accomplice of a deadbeat fraud. Ryan walked slowly back up the stairs, his shoulders slumped, his tailored suit suddenly looking cheap and ridiculous. He looked at the neon orange notice taped to the glass, then looked up directly at the security camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. He knew I was watching. He knew I had orchestrated this exact sequence of events. I sat in the cool, quiet comfort of my executive office, taking a slow, refreshing sip of my iced water. Ryan had wanted to play a high-stakes game of power and property, but I owned the board. I watched the live feed as Ryan stood paralyzed on the stone patio. His cell phone began to ring. The shrill sound jolted him out of his shock. He pulled the phone from his pocket. The caller ID must have been terrifying because the remaining color drained from his face. It was his managing broker. Tech billionaires do not walk away quietly. They make phone calls. Ryan answered the call with a trembling hand pressing the phone to his ear. I could not hear the broker's voice through the security camera feed, but the volume of the yelling made Ryan flinch backward. His boss was tearing him apart. Ryan tried to speak, holding up his free hand in a pleading gesture. "Sir, please listen to me." Ryan stammered, his voice carrying over the audio feed. "It is a misunderstanding. My vendor pulled the staging without authorization. I can fix this." But the broker was not listening. Ryan's posture crumbled. The firm's reputation had just been dragged through the mud. The broker did not care about domestic disputes. He cared that Ryan made their prestigious agency look like a bankrupt joke. "Yes, sir," Ryan whispered, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "I will come to the office right now." He ended the call and shoved the phone into his pocket. He turned to Amber, who was crying in the hollow entryway. "Get in the car," he snapped. He felt completely ruined. They ran down the concrete steps to the Mercedes. Ryan threw the car into reverse, spinning the tires against the cobblestone driveway as he sped away. I closed the security camera window on my computer monitor. The show was over, and the outcome was absolute perfection. I stood up and walked over to the espresso machine. I pressed the button, listening to the sound of the coffee beans grinding. As the dark liquid poured into my ceramic mug, my cell phone began to vibrate. The screen lit up with Ryan's name. He was calling me. I did not answer. I picked up my fresh cup of coffee, inhaled the rich, roasted aroma, and watched the phone ring. 10 seconds later, it rang again. And then again. Ryan was frantically trying to reach me as he drove back to his brokerage. He was a cornered animal, lashing out with everything he had left. When the fourth call went to voicemail, I opened my audio messages. I pressed play on the first recording, taking a slow, satisfying sip of my hot coffee. "Natalie, you vindictive, psychotic witch!" Ryan screamed into the phone. The background noise of his car engine roaring indicated he was driving recklessly. "You think this is funny? You think you can destroy my career because you are a jealous, bitter woman. I am going to ruin you. I am going to sue your staging company into the ground until you are begging me for pennies. You humiliated me in front of my biggest client. You stole my property. You are dead to me. I am going to make sure you never work in this city again. I am going to destroy your life." The message ended with a loud, aggressive beep. I smiled, taking another sip of my coffee. He was threatening to destroy my life hours after legally evicting me from my home. He truly believed he was the victim. A minute later, a second voicemail arrived. This one was even more unhinged. "You better tell your workers to bring my furniture back right now," Ryan demanded, his voice cracking with panic. "I am not playing games, Natalie. If my stuff is not back in my house tonight, I am coming to your warehouse and I will burn it down. You cannot do this to me. Call me back right now or you will regret it." He was losing his grip on reality. The polished broker had been reduced to a screaming maniac, leaving documented evidence of his instability. A third voicemail chimed in. "Natalie, please?" His tone shifted wildly from aggressive to desperate whine. "Why are you doing this to me? Just pick up the phone. My broker is threatening to terminate my license. Amber is screaming at me. Just bring the furniture back and we can talk like adults. I will give you a fair settlement. Just do not ruin my career. Please." I paused the playback. The sheer whiplash of his emotions was exhausting. He went from threatening arson to begging for mercy in 3 minutes. I did not feel a single ounce of pity. I set my coffee down on the glass desk. I opened my email and created a new message addressed to my corporate attorney named Mitchell. I attached the 3 audio files directly to the email. The subject line was simply, "Evidence of harassment from Ryan Davis." In the body, I typed a brief note. "Mitchell, please review the attached voicemails. Ryan is threatening to burn down my commercial warehouse and actively harassing me. Please file for an immediate restraining order and add these threats to his active breach of contract file." I hit send, watching the email vanish into the outbox. The legal snare was fully secured. He had given my lawyer everything needed to strip him of any credibility in front of a judge. Ryan wanted to control the narrative. He wanted to spin a story to his boss about how I was a crazy, vindictive wife. But recorded voicemails do not lie. I picked up my coffee, feeling a profound sense of peace. Ryan was speeding toward an office where he was going to face the brutal consequences of his arrogance. The professional blowback was in motion, and it was going to hit him harder than a freight train. I returned to my computer monitor, ready to review the rest of my appointments. I had a staging business to run, and I was not going to let the pathetic meltdown of a soon-to-be unemployed broker distract me. I learned the exact details of Ryan's next desperate move a few days later, when the fragile foundation of his extremely toxic family finally shattered completely. After fleeing his busy brokerage with his tail tucked firmly between his legs, he did not go back to his cold, empty house. He drove his car straight to the one single place where his obvious lies were still treated like absolute gospel truth. He went directly to his enabling mother's house. David and Keisha happened to be there that afternoon, eating a late lunch in the dining room, when the front door flew open and banged loudly against the wall. Ryan burst into the house looking completely unhinged. His designer suit was rumpled, his tie was loosened, and his face was a blotchy, tear-stained mess. Amber was nowhere to be seen, likely having demanded he drop her off at a downtown hotel. "Mom," he sobbed, collapsing into the entryway. "She has gone completely insane." Barbara rushed to her golden child, wrapping her arms around him. David stood up, looking alarmed, while Keisha remained seated, her accountant mind immediately going on high alert. Ryan began to spin a fabricated tale of pure victimhood. He paced around the living room, waving his hands in the air as he told them that I had suffered a psychotic break. He claimed that because I could not handle the divorce, I had hired violent thugs to break into his house. He painted himself as a brave protector, but said I overwhelmed him with sheer numbers. He told them I stole hundreds of thousands of dollars of his personal property out of spite. He knew he had to explain the disaster at Summit Ridge before his family saw the fallout online or heard it from David, who networked with other realtors. "She sabotaged my career," Ryan yelled, his voice cracking. "I was about to close a $5 million deal. It was a guaranteed commission. But she went to the property behind my back and vandalized it. She stripped the entire house just hours before my VIP client arrived. My broker suspended me. She is trying to leave me bankrupt just because I wanted to move on." Barbara gasped, clutching her chest in horror. "I knew it," she hissed venomously. "I always knew that woman was a vindictive gold-digging parasite. She is trying to ruin you because she knows she is nothing without your money. Oh, my poor boy, we are not going to let her get away with this." Barbara turned her furious gaze toward her younger son. "David," she commanded sharply, "you have to help your brother right now. We need to destroy her before she does any more damage." David looked hesitant. "Help him how, Mom? I am not a lawyer." "No, but you have savings," Barbara snapped. "You and Keisha have that emergency fund. I want you to transfer $20,000 to Ryan immediately so he can hire a bulldog litigator. We are going to sue Natalie for grand larceny, defamation, and extreme emotional distress. We will take her company, her car, and every last dime she has away." Keisha, who had been sitting quietly at the dining table this entire time, finally put her napkin down. As an experienced financial auditor, Keisha made her living detecting fraud. She possessed a pragmatic, fierce intelligence, and she did not operate on blind family loyalty. She operated on hard data. And as she sat there watching Ryan put on his theatrical performance, her sharp mind began cross-referencing his frantic claims against the financial timeline she already knew. "Ryan," Keisha said, her voice calm but cutting effortlessly through the hysterical energy in the room. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Natalie stole your furniture from the house this morning." "Yes," Ryan snapped, glaring at her as if she were stupid. "She took everything. I paid for all of it, and she just loaded it into trucks and robbed me blind." Keisha nodded slowly, her dark eyes narrowing. "But earlier today, when you and Barbara came to kick her out, you explicitly said you had been paying all her bills because her interior design hobby was failing. You said she had absolutely no money." Absolutely. Ryan swallowed hard, a brief flash of panic crossing his face. "Yes, that is right. She is broke. She has been draining my accounts for years." "So how exactly did a broke woman hire 15 professional movers and 3 massive commercial trucks on zero notice?" Keisha pressed, leaning forward slightly. "Furthermore, you just said she vandalized your $5 million listing. But I thought your broker handled the staging for those luxury properties. Why would she even have access to a $5 million mansion in a gated community unless she was the one contracted to furnish it?" David looked back and forth between his wife and his brother, a seed of deep doubt suddenly taking root in his mind. Ryan stammered, his face flushing red. "You do not know how the real estate industry works, Keisha. She stole my keys. She is a criminal. It does not matter how she did it. What matters is that I need the money for a lawyer right now. Keisha stared at him for a silent moment. She thought about the $50,000 she and David had transferred to Ryan 2 months ago. Ryan had sworn it was for a secure joint property investment fund that would yield a 20% return. Yet here he was, the wealthy broker, begging his younger brother for legal fees because his wife took the sofa. The numbers were entirely disjointed. The narrative was bleeding inconsistencies. Keisha did not say another word. She stood up from the table, picked up her purse, and quietly decided that before she handed over another single cent to her brother-in-law, she was going to pay a visit to the one person who actually held the receipts. Me. It was shortly after 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon when my receptionist buzzed my intercom to announce an unexpected visitor. Keisha was standing in the sleek, modern lobby of Lux Interiors. I told my receptionist to send her right up. When Keisha walked through the heavy glass doors of my executive office, I could see her eyes rapidly taking in the environment. She was looking at the expansive drafting tables, the massive digital displays showing active staging logistics across the state, and my team of designers working diligently at their stations. This was not the pathetic little interior design hobby Ryan had described to his family. This was a highly lucrative corporate machine, and Keisha, being an accountant, instantly recognized the sheer scale of the overhead. She stepped into my private office, and I gestured for her to take a seat in one of the leather guest chairs facing my desk. She did not sit down. She stood tall, her posture rigid, her designer handbag clutched tightly in her hand. "I am not here to argue with you, Natalie," she stated, her voice completely devoid of the hostility she had displayed at my house the previous morning. "I am here for the heirloom ring. Ryan said you took it when you cleared out the house. That ring belonged to his grandmother and it needs to stay in the family. He wants it back, and I volunteered to come get it because I do not trust him to be in the same room as you right now without doing something stupid." I did not argue. I simply turned around and opened the small biometric safe built into the wall behind my desk. I retrieved the small velvet box and placed it gently on the glass surface between us. "Take it," I said smoothly. "I never wanted it. Ryan gave it to me when he proposed, but considering he was sleeping with his assistant for the past year, it holds absolutely zero sentimental value to me." Keisha looked mildly surprised by my immediate compliance. She picked up the velvet box, opening it to verify the diamond ring was inside before slipping it into her purse. She lingered for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me. "Ryan came to the house yesterday," Keisha said, her tone cautious. "He was hysterical. He said you sabotaged his $5 million listing and that you hired thugs to rob him. He asked David for $20,000 to hire a lawyer to sue you." I leaned back in my chair, lacing my fingers together. "And being the brilliant financial auditor that you are, Keisha, I am guessing the numbers he was throwing around did not quite add up for you." Keisha tightened her grip on her purse. Her jaw set hard. "Ryan claims he paid for everything. He claims you drained his accounts. But seeing this office, seeing your operation, I know that is a lie. I just need to know how deep the lies go. Natalie, did he steal from us?" I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I had prepared it specifically for this exact moment. I slid the envelope across the smooth glass desk toward her. "I respect you, Keisha," I said, maintaining direct eye contact. "I always have. You work hard for your money and you protect your family. Ryan used that loyalty against you. Open the folder." Keisha did not hesitate. She unclasped the envelope and pulled out the stack of highlighted financial documents. She was an accountant. She did not need me to interpret spreadsheets for her. She could read bank wires like a second language. I watched her eyes scan the first page. "That is the joint bank account Ryan and I shared," I explained calmly. "Look at the deposit history from 2 months ago. You will see a wire transfer of exactly $50,000 from you and David. The memo line clearly states it is for the joint property investment fund Ryan pitched to you." Keisha flipped to the next page, her breathing growing shallow. "Now look at the outbound wire from that exact same account, processed less than 48 hours later," I continued. Ryan did not put your money into an escrow account. He did not invest it in a property fund. He wired $48,500 directly to a luxury automotive dealership downtown. Keisha flipped to the third document. It was a copy of the bill of sale I had legally subpoenaed through my divorce attorney during discovery. It was a receipt for a brand new metallic black Porsche Cayenne. The registered owner on the title was not Ryan Davis. It was Amber Hayes. Keisha's hands began to tremble. The paper crinkled sharply in her grip as the devastating reality washed over her. Ryan had looked his own brother in the eye and stolen his emergency savings just to buy a luxury vehicle for a 28-year-old mistress. The betrayal was so deep, so entirely sociopathic, that it completely shattered any remaining loyalty Keisha held for the Davis family. She dropped the papers onto my desk like they were contaminated. Pure calculating rage radiated from her entire body. She had worked 12-hour days to build her accounting firm and secure that savings account for her future children. Ryan had wiped it out to fund his pathetic midlife crisis and stroke his inflated ego. Barbara wanted David to give him another $20,000 for a lawyer, Keisha whispered, her voice shaking with absolute fury. He was going to take more from us to pay for his ridiculous lies. He was perfectly willing to bankrupt his own brother. I nodded slowly. He is drowning, Keisha. He just lost his biggest commission because my company legally repossessed the staging he never paid for. He is broke and he is desperate. If you give him that money, you will never see it again. Keisha closed her eyes, taking a long, deep breath to steady herself. When she opened them again, the pragmatic sister-in-law was gone. She was replaced by a woman ready to go to war. She reached across the desk and gathered the documents, carefully sliding them back into the manila envelope. I need to keep these, she stated, her voice cold and hard as steel. Take them, I replied. Keisha tucked the envelope under her arm. Two powerful women sat across from each other, forming an unspoken alliance, forged in the fire of Ryan's deceit. I am going to the brokerage, Keisha said, turning toward the door. I am going to have a little chat with my brother-in-law. Do not hold back, I told her. I will not, she promised, turning the brass handle and walking out. Keisha did not just drive to Ryan's real estate brokerage. She descended upon it like a calculated storm. She walked through the heavy glass double doors, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The receptionist sitting at the front desk looked up with a polite smile. Welcome to Prestige Realty, she greeted. I do not need help, Keisha replied, bypassing the desk entirely. I know where I am going. She marched directly into the center of the bullpen. Ryan was standing outside the glass-walled office of his managing broker. He was already sweating profusely as he tried to defend his disastrous Summit Ridge open house to his furious boss. Ryan saw Keisha approaching, and a flicker of relief briefly crossed his panicked face. He thought his mother had sent Keisha to deliver the $20,000 he had begged for. Keisha, he breathed, stepping away from his boss and walking toward her. You are here. Did David send you with the check? I must retain the lawyer today. Keisha stopped 3 feet away. The managing broker stepped out of his office, narrowing his eyes at the interruption. I do not have a check for you, Ryan, Keisha said, her voice projecting clearly across the office. I have a very simple financial question. Ryan frowned, looking nervously around at his coworkers. Keisha, please keep your voice down, he hissed. My boss is standing right there. We are going to talk about it right here, Keisha stated, her tone echoing with absolute authority. I want your boss and every single agent in this room to understand exactly what kind of man they are working with. You came to my house crying about how Natalie drained your accounts. You begged your own brother to empty his savings to fund your legal defense. Ryan swallowed hard. Keisha, stop, he pleaded, grabbing her arm. Keisha yanked her arm back with such force that Ryan stumbled. Do not ever touch me, she warned, her eyes blazing. She unclasped her designer handbag and pulled out the thick manila envelope. She slammed it down onto the nearest glass desk with a loud crack that made Amber jump out of her chair. 2 months ago, my husband and I wired $50,000 into your bank account, Keisha announced loudly, addressing the entire silent office. You pitched us a joint property investment fund. You swore you had a secure commercial real estate venture. You looked your own brother right in the eye and promised him a massive return on our savings. The managing broker crossed his arms, stepping closer. Wire fraud and mishandling of client funds were immediate termination offenses in the real estate world. It is tied up in escrow. Ryan stammered, sweat dripping down his temples. The closing got delayed, Keisha. You have to understand the market. Keisha let out a sharp, humorless laugh. I understand bank statements. She pulled the highlighted wire transfer documents out of the envelope and held them up in the air. 48 hours after David and I wired you our $50,000, you initiated an outbound wire transfer for $48,500. It did not go to an escrow account. It went directly to a luxury automotive dealership downtown. A collective gasp rippled through the bullpen. Amber suddenly turned ghost white. You stole $50,000 from your own family. Keisha continued, her voice ringing with articulate, devastating fury. You stole from the emergency fund I built for my future children. And you did not even use it to pay off your corporate debts. You used my money to buy a metallic black Porsche Cayenne, and you put the title entirely in your assistant's name. Keisha turned her fierce gaze toward Amber. The entire office stared at the young assistant. The secret office affair was suddenly thrust into the brutal light of day, combined with a massive financial crime. Ryan was shaking. Keisha, please. He begged, tears welling up in his eyes. It was a loan. I was going to pay you back with my commission from the Summit Ridge house today. I swear to God. But you did not get that commission, did you? Keisha fired back ruthlessly. Because you are a broke, fraudulent deadbeat who relies entirely on his wife to furnish his empty lies. I went to see Natalie today. She proved to me that she owns every single piece of luxury staging you have ever used to close a deal. You have not paid her in months. You are hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to her company. You are a complete fraud, Ryan. You steal wealth from the women in your life. The managing broker stepped forward, his face a mask of absolute fury. Ryan, is this true? The boss demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Did you solicit investment funds under false pretenses and divert them for personal purchases? Because if you did, you have jeopardized the licensing of this entire brokerage. Ryan opened his mouth to defend himself, but no words came out. He was completely trapped. I want my $50,000 back by Monday morning, Keisha delivered her final ultimatum, staring directly into Ryan's terrified eyes. If that money is not sitting in my account by 9 o'clock sharp, I am driving straight to the police station to file criminal charges for wire fraud and grand larceny. Then I am calling the Real Estate Commission to report your illegal solicitation of funds. I will have your license permanently revoked. Keisha did not wait for his response. She calmly placed the documents back into the envelope, tucked it under her arm, and turned around. She walked back through the bullpen, leaving a deafening silence in her wake. Ryan was left standing completely exposed. He had no money, no wife, no dignity, and no family left to manipulate. The brilliant sister-in-law had spoken, and she had burned his fragile kingdom completely down to the ground. For a long, agonizing moment after Keisha walked out the heavy glass doors, the entire bullpen of Prestige Realty remained trapped in a stunned, suffocating silence. The faint hum of the overhead air conditioning was the only sound echoing through the massive room. Dozens of elite real estate agents, junior brokers, and administrative assistants stared wide-eyed at Ryan. They had just witnessed the complete public execution of the firm's supposedly most successful luxury broker. Amber was pressed against the edge of her desk, her face pale and her eyes darting nervously around the room as she realized every single person now knew she was driving a stolen Porsche. The managing broker, a strict, unforgiving man named Mr. Harrington, finally broke the silence. He turned his head slowly, surveying the bullpen. Everyone get back to work, Harrington commanded, his voice low, but carrying a sharp edge of absolute authority. Right now. Do not make me repeat myself. The agents immediately snapped out of their shock, scrambling back to their computer monitors and picking up their desk phones. The frantic clicking of keyboards resumed, but the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Harrington did not move. He kept his dark, furious gaze locked entirely on Ryan. Ryan was still standing in the center of the aisle, his chest heaving, his expensive suit completely soaked in cold, nervous sweat. "My office," Harrington barked, pointing a rigid finger toward the glass-walled executive suite. "Now." Ryan swallowed hard, nodding frantically. "Yes, sir," he whispered. He cast a desperate, pleading glance at Amber, but she immediately looked away, pretending to organize a stack of blank papers on her desk. She was already actively distancing herself from a sinking ship. Ryan walked heavily toward the executive office, feeling the intense, burning stares of his colleagues tracking his every single movement. He stepped inside the suite, and Harrington slammed the heavy glass door shut behind him, sealing them inside a soundproof box. The blinds were left wide open, ensuring the entire agency had a front-row seat to the massacre. Harrington walked behind his massive oak desk but did not sit down. He slammed both of his hands onto the polished wood, leaning forward like a predator ready to strike. "You humiliated me today." Ryan Harrington began, his voice a lethal whisper that radiated pure venom. "You dragged the name of Prestige Realty through the dirt in front of one of the most powerful tech billionaires in the state. You brought a highly qualified buyer into a stripped, empty house with a neon repossession notice taped to the front door because you could not manage to pay your own wife for her services." "I can explain," Sir Ryan pleaded, holding his hands up defensively. "It is a messy divorce. She ambushed me. She is trying to ruin my reputation out of spite. I am a top producer for this firm. I bring in millions of dollars in revenue. You know my track record. Give me 24 hours and I will smooth things over with the client. I can fix this." Harrington let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "You think the Summit Ridge disaster is what we are talking about right now? That was just incompetence, Ryan. That was just a humiliating professional failure. But what your sister-in-law just exposed out there on the floor, that is a massive felony. You solicited $50,000 under the guise of a commercial real estate investment fund and used it to buy a luxury vehicle for your assistant. That is textbook wire fraud. That is embezzlement." "It was a private family loan," Ryan lied desperately, his voice cracking with panic. "She is just exaggerating because she is emotional. It has absolutely nothing to do with the brokerage." "Do not insult my intelligence," Harrington roared, slamming his fist on the desk so hard the coffee mug rattled. "If she goes to the police on Monday morning, the authorities are going to start digging into your finances. The Securities and Exchange Commission will launch a full investigation. They will audit every single escrow account you have ever touched under my broker's license. They will pull my firm into a massive federal fraud scandal. I have spent 30 years building the pristine reputation of this agency, and I am not going to let a reckless, arrogant fraud destroy it because he wanted to play sugar daddy to his assistant." "Please." Ryan begged, actual tears finally spilling over his eyelashes. "I will get the money back. I will sell my house. I will pay her back before Monday. Just do not let me go. I need this job. If I lose my income, my wife is going to crush me in civil court. I will have absolutely nothing left." "You already have nothing left," Harrington replied, his voice turning ice cold and completely devoid of mercy. "You are a liability. You are officially terminated effective immediately. I am revoking the sponsorship of your real estate license. You no longer represent Prestige Realty in any capacity." Ryan gasped, stumbling backward as if he had been physically struck. "No," he choked out. "You cannot do this." Harrington picked up his desk phone and pressed a single button on the intercom. "Security," he said, keeping his eyes locked on Ryan. "I need 2 guards at my office right now to escort a terminated employee off the premises." Less than a minute later, 2 large security guards wearing crisp white shirts and black ties walked into the glass office. Ryan stood completely paralyzed, his entire identity crumbling into dust. He had defined his entire self-worth by his prestigious career, his tailored suits, and his ability to project immense wealth. Now he was being treated like a common criminal. "Watch him pack his personal belongings," Harrington instructed the guards, pointing toward Ryan's desk in the bullpen. "1 box. He is not allowed to take any corporate files, client contact lists, or proprietary data." If he tries to take a single piece of company property, restrain him and call the police. The guards nodded, stepping forward and grabbing Ryan by the arms. They physically turned him around and marched him out of the executive suite. The entire office stopped working again, openly watching the horrific spectacle. Ryan was guided to his desk. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely pick up his framed photos and his expensive pens. He dropped them into a small cardboard box. He looked over at Amber, begging for a single ounce of sympathy, but she had turned her chair completely around, refusing to even make eye contact with him. "Let us go," the larger guard ordered, placing a heavy hand on Ryan's shoulder. Ryan picked up his meager box of belongings and walked down the center aisle of the brokerage. The silence was deafening. He was doing the perp walk of absolute shame. He passed the receptionist desk, the glass double doors, and the massive digital display showing the multi-million-dollar listings he would never touch again. He was pushed out into the sweltering afternoon heat of the concrete parking lot. He was completely jobless, utterly disgraced, facing a massive corporate lawsuit from my company and a devastating criminal fraud lawsuit from his own brother. His ego-driven career was dead, and he had absolutely no one to blame but himself. Ryan drove back to Oakwood Drive in a complete daze. The sweltering afternoon heat faded into the cool shadows as he navigated the familiar winding roads. He parked his leased Mercedes in the driveway, staring blankly at the massive brick facade of the house. It was the house he had fought so hard to protect with his prenuptial agreement. It was the asset he thought made him a king. But as he walked up the concrete steps and pushed open the heavy oak door, he felt no sense of victory. The interior of the house was completely dark. Because my crew had removed the smart lighting, the windows were bare and the fading twilight cast long, eerie shadows across the empty hardwood floors. The central air conditioning had also been deactivated, leaving the stagnant air inside feeling heavy and uncomfortably warm. Ryan stepped into the foyer, his footsteps echoing hollowly. "Amber," he called out, his voice sounding weak and pathetic in the vast emptiness. He found her sitting on the floor in the center of the master bedroom. She had wrapped herself in her silk robe. Surrounding her on the bare wood were several expensive designer travel bags filled with the clothes she had managed to grab before my alpha crew stripped the walk-in closet. Amber looked up as Ryan entered the room. Her face was streaked with dried tears. "Where have you been?" she snapped, her voice sharp and accusatory. "I have been sitting on this hard floor for 5 hours. My phone battery is dying. I am starving and I cannot even order food because there is nowhere to sit and eat it." Ryan dropped his small cardboard box onto the floor next to him. He sank down, leaning his back against the bare drywall. He looked completely defeated. His tie was undone, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were hollow. "Amber, I need you to listen to me," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Something terrible happened at the office today." Amber stiffened, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the pathetic box of office supplies. "What do you mean something terrible happened?" she demanded. "Did your boss yell at you about the Summit Ridge open house?" Ryan shook his head. "It is worse," he choked out. "It is much worse." Keisha came to the brokerage. She stood right in the middle of the bullpen and announced everything. She told the entire office about the $50,000 wire transfer. She told my boss that the investment fund was a lie and that I used my brother's money to buy your Porsche. Amber gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "You told me that money was a bonus from your firm," she shrieked. "You told me you earned that car." "She knows," Ryan continued, sobbing openly now. "My boss fired me on the spot. He stripped my license. He had security escort me out of the building. I do not have a job, Amber. I do not have a career. Keisha is demanding the $50,000 back by Monday morning, or she is going to the police to file criminal charges for wire fraud. I have absolutely no money to pay her back because Natalie owns all the staging and is suing me for the corporate debt." Amber stared at him in absolute horror. The luxurious fantasy she had built in her mind, the image of marrying a wealthy, high-powered real estate broker, shattered completely into a million jagged pieces. The man sitting in front of her was not a millionaire. He was a broke, unemployed fraud facing imminent criminal charges. She had slept with her boss to secure a life of endless luxury, and now she was sitting on the floor of a dark, empty house with a man who was about to go to prison. A cold, calculating look instantly washed over her face. The sweet, supportive mistress completely vanished. She stood up, brushing the dust off her silk robe. She looked down at Ryan with pure, unadulterated disgust. "You are a broke loser," Amber spat, her voice dripping with venom. Ryan looked up, his eyes wide with shock. "Amber, please," he begged, reaching a hand out toward her. "We can figure this out. I can sell the house. I can get a lawyer. Do not touch me." She recoiled, kicking his hand away. "You lied to me. You made me think you were this powerful rich man, but you are just a pathetic parasite living off your wife's money. And now you want me to sit here in the dark and wait for the police to arrest you. You are completely delusional." Amber pulled her cell phone from her pocket, tapping the screen rapidly to open her rideshare application. "I am leaving," she announced, grabbing the handles of her designer travel bags. The bags that my staging income had technically paid for. "Where are you going?" Ryan cried, scrambling to his feet. "You cannot just leave me here alone. I gave up my marriage for you. I bought you that car. I bought you those bags." "No, you stole from your brother to buy me that car," Amber corrected ruthlessly, hoisting the bags onto her shoulder. "And I am taking it with me before the police sees it. You threw your marriage away because you are a narcissistic idiot who thought he was smarter than everyone else. Well, you are not. You are nothing." Amber turned on her heel and walked out of the master bedroom. Ryan followed her down the hall, begging and pleading, but she completely ignored him. She marched out the front door and down the concrete steps directly toward a waiting black SUV. She opened the heavy door and climbed inside without a single backward glance. The vehicle pulled away rapidly, leaving Ryan standing completely alone in the creeping darkness. The absolute silence of the empty neighborhood crashed down upon him. He lost absolutely everything. 4 weeks passed since that devastating afternoon. The luxurious premarital asset that Ryan had fought so viciously to protect had transformed into a massive brick tomb. He was entirely alone. Without his substantial real estate commission checks, and without my silent financial support, his perfectly curated life collapsed with terrifying speed. He could not afford to pay the massive utility bills required to heat and illuminate a 4-bedroom mansion. By the 3rd week, the power company shut off the electricity. The water company followed shortly after. Ryan was reduced to sleeping on a cheap plastic air mattress he bought from a discount store, placing it directly on the cold, bare floorboards of the master bedroom. He wrapped himself in heavy moving blankets to survive the dropping autumn temperatures. He spent his days sitting in the dark staring at his dead cell phone. He could not charge it. He could not call his former colleagues to beg for a job. His mother Barbara had completely cut him off after Keisha exposed his financial crimes. David refused to speak to him. Amber had vanished into the city, undoubtedly hunting for a new wealthy target. Ryan was a ghost haunting his own empty property, living off canned food and tap water he had hoarded in jugs before the shutoff. The pristine luxury broker who used to wear Italian suits and sip expensive scotch was now wearing the same wrinkled sweatpants for 5 days straight. He had no plan and no escape route. He simply existed in the hollow echo of his colossal failures, waiting for the inevitable end. On a freezing Tuesday morning, the piercing sound of a heavy fist pounding against the front door shattered the dead silence of the house. Ryan jolted awake on his deflating air mattress, shivering violently. The knocking was loud, aggressive, and relentless. For a brief, desperate second, a spark of hope ignited in his chest. He thought maybe it was his mother coming to bail him out. He thought maybe David had forgiven him and convinced Keisha to drop her ultimatums. He threw the heavy moving blanket off his shoulders and scrambled to his feet. He hurried down the grand staircase, his bare feet slapping against the cold wood. The house was freezing, and his breath formed tiny white clouds in the air. He reached the grand entryway and unlocked the heavy mahogany door, pulling it open with trembling hands. Standing on his concrete porch was not his forgiving mother or his sympathetic brother. It was a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing a beige trench coat and a completely neutral expression. The man was holding a thick stack of sealed manila envelopes. He looked Ryan up and down, taking in the dirty sweatpants, the unkempt beard, and the dark circles under his eyes. "Are you Ryan Davis?" the man asked, his voice flat and entirely professional. Ryan gripped the edge of the door, his stomach dropping into his shoes. "Yes." He rasped, his throat dry from lack of clean water. "That is me." "Who are you?" The man did not introduce himself. He simply thrust the heavy stack of envelopes directly into Ryan's chest, forcing him to take them. "You have been served, sir," the man stated bluntly. He turned around immediately, walking down the porch steps and getting into a plain gray sedan parked by the curb. He drove away, leaving Ryan standing barefoot on the freezing concrete, holding the physical manifestation of his absolute ruin. Ryan closed the front door slowly, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped the envelopes. He walked into the empty living room, sinking down onto the bare floorboards, right where my custom velvet sofa used to sit. The morning sunlight streamed through the bare windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the cold air. He ripped open the first heavy envelope. It bore the official seal of the state civil court and the letterhead of my corporate attorney, Mitchell. It was a formal summons and complaint. Lux Interiors Limited Liability Company was officially suing Ryan Davis for breach of contract, severe commercial default, and property damages. The total amount demanded was $150,000 in unpaid staging fees, plus $30,000 in legal costs and accumulated interest. My lawyer had attached every single unpaid invoice, every signed contract, and the threatening voicemails Ryan had left on my phone. The lawsuit was absolutely bulletproof. He had zero defense. A civil judge would look at the paperwork and immediately rule in my favor. Ryan felt the bile rising in his throat. He tossed the first stack of papers aside and tore open the second envelope. This one was filed by a different law firm, but the plaintiffs were painfully familiar. David and Keisha Davis were suing him for $50,000. The legal language was brutal and unforgiving. It accused Ryan of fraudulent misrepresentation, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of financial harm. But the civil lawsuit was not the worst part. Attached to the back of the complaint was a formal notification that Keisha had officially submitted the wire transfer records to the district attorney's office. She had followed through on her threat. An active criminal investigation for wire fraud had been opened against him. He was not just facing bankruptcy. He was facing potential prison time. The absolute legal reality of his actions crashed down upon him, crushing the last remaining fragments of his ego. He owed over $200,000 in immediate legal judgments. He had absolutely zero income, zero savings, and terrible credit. He looked around the freezing empty house, the house he had kicked me out of so he could play billionaire with his mistress. He realized with terrifying clarity that this massive hollow structure was the only asset he had left in the world. And it was no longer his sanctuary. It was his only bargaining chip to stay out of a jail cell and survive. The divorce mediation took place 3 weeks later in a very cold, sterile conference room high above the city. I sat at the long mahogany table wearing a very sharp emerald green suit, feeling completely rested and utterly in control. Next to me sat my attorney Mitchell, calmly organizing his meticulously prepared files. When the heavy oak door opened, Ryan walked in, and the physical transformation was genuinely shocking. The arrogant, polished real estate broker, who used to spend an hour every morning styling his hair, was completely gone. He looked incredibly haggard. His suit hung loosely on his shrinking frame. His face was deeply lined with exhaustion, and his eyes darted around the room with the frantic energy of a cornered animal. He took a seat across from me, accompanied by a cheap court-appointed mediator because he could no longer afford private legal counsel. He did not even look at me. He kept his eyes glued to the table, clutching a single manila folder as if his life depended on it. The mediator, a stern older woman with silver hair, adjusted her glasses and opened the session. We are here to finalize the division of assets. She began, her voice entirely devoid of emotion. Let us address the primary residence on Oakwood Drive. Mr. Davis, you have submitted the original prenuptial agreement, claiming the house as your exclusive premarital property. Ryan sat up slightly straighter, a brief flicker of his old arrogance returning. Yes, he said, his voice raspy. I owned the house before the marriage. It is entirely mine. She has no claim to it. I want that documented and finalized today so I can move forward. Mitchell leaned forward, resting his elbows on the polished mahogany table. He smiled a sharp, predatory smile. That would be a straightforward process, Mr. Davis, if you actually owned the equity in the home. But unfortunately, the property is currently suffocating under massive financial encumbrances. Mitchell slid a thick stack of certified documents across the table toward the mediator. As of yesterday afternoon, Lux Interiors Limited Liability Company was granted a summary judgment against Mr. Davis for $180,000, including accumulated interest and legal fees, Mitchell explained smoothly. Furthermore, there is a secondary civil judgment filed by his brother David Davis for $55,000 related to a fraudulent wire transfer. Because Mr. Davis is currently unemployed and possesses zero liquid assets, both creditors have legally placed heavy liens directly against the Oakwood Drive property. Ryan slammed his hand down on the table. You cannot do that, he yelled, glaring at Mitchell. That is my house. You cannot just steal it from me. Nobody is stealing anything, Mr. Davis, the mediator interrupted sharply, giving him a warning look. A lien is a legal claim against an asset used as collateral to satisfy a massive debt. You owe over $230,000 in immediate court-ordered restitution. According to your own submitted financial disclosures, you currently have $400 in your checking account and zero income. How exactly do you plan to satisfy these legal judgments? I will get a new job, Ryan stammered, sweat forming on his forehead. I am a top luxury broker. I just need a few weeks to secure a position at another agency, and I can set up a payment plan. Mitchell let out a quiet, dry laugh. No reputable real estate agency in this state will hire you, Mr. Davis. Your real estate license is currently suspended pending a massive federal investigation into wire fraud. You cannot legally sell property, you cannot secure a loan because your credit is destroyed, and you cannot afford the monthly mortgage payments or the property taxes on that mansion. You are financially drowning. The mediator looked down at the documents, reviewing the brutal mathematical reality of Ryan's existence. Mr. Davis, your attorney should have explained this to you, she said, her tone softening just a fraction, but remaining relentlessly firm. You cannot keep the house. You do not have the capital to maintain it or pay off the massive liens attached to the deed. If you do not voluntarily surrender the property today, your creditors will simply force a foreclosure. The bank will seize it, and you will be left with absolutely nothing but bankruptcy and potential criminal charges. Ryan stared at her, his mouth opening and closing in silent horror. The prenuptial agreement he had waved in my face. The ironclad shield he thought protected his kingdom was completely useless against corporate debt and fraud restitution. He had kicked me out of that house so he could live like a king with his mistress. Now that exact same house was acting as an anchor, dragging him down into the financial abyss. There is only one viable legal path forward. The mediator continued, pulling a fresh document from her folder. The court requires the immediate liquidation of the Oakwood Drive property. The house will be put on the market and sold at a rapid discount. The proceeds from the sale will first pay off your outstanding mortgage. The remaining equity will be immediately seized to pay off the massive debts you owe to Lux Interiors and your brother David. If there is anything left over after the creditors are satisfied, you will receive it. But looking at the current market value against your massive liabilities, you will likely walk away with absolutely nothing. Ryan looked like he had been physically shot. He slumped back, his eyes wide and vacant. He slowly made direct eye contact with me. I sat perfectly still, my expression entirely neutral. I did not gloat or smile. I let him drown in his catastrophic failure. Sign the agreement, Ryan. I commanded, my voice cutting through the silent room. He reached out, picking up the cheap plastic pen. With a heavy sigh, he slowly signed his name. He officially lost his beloved premarital house forever. I left the sterile mediation room without looking back, feeling lighter than I had in 5 long years. Ryan remained sitting at the dark mahogany table, staring blankly at the ink drying on the surrender agreement. I walked down the concrete steps of the courthouse, my emerald green suit catching the bright afternoon sunlight. I drove across the city, leaving the suburban memories of Oakwood Drive completely behind me. My destination was a stunning modern penthouse located right in the vibrant heart of the downtown commercial district. It was a space I had purchased entirely on my own using the immense profits from Luxe Interiors. When I stepped out of the private elevator and unlocked my front door, I was immediately enveloped by the warm, inviting aesthetic of my true sanctuary. The penthouse was a masterpiece of design. Unlike the cold, calculated staging I used for Ryan's luxury listings, every single piece of furniture in this home was carefully chosen for my own personal comfort. A massive plush cream-colored sectional anchored the living room, facing floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city skyline. Rich mahogany bookshelves lined the walls, filled with my favorite novels and architectural design portfolios. The air smelled of expensive vanilla candles and fresh orchids. I walked into my custom gourmet kitchen, running my hand along the smooth, cool surface of the imported marble island. I was no longer a guest in a borrowed castle. I was the absolute, undisputed queen of my own domain. The soft chime of my doorbell interrupted the quiet tranquility of the afternoon. I walked over to the entryway and smiled as I opened the door. Keisha stood in the hallway wearing a sharp-tailored blazer and holding an expensive bottle of red wine. Since the explosive confrontation at the real estate brokerage, Keisha and I had developed a profound and genuine friendship. The ashes of Ryan's massive betrayal had forged an unbreakable bond of mutual respect between us. We were two incredibly ambitious, fiercely independent women who refused to be manipulated or stolen from by weak men. "Come on in, Keisha," I greeted, stepping aside to let her enter. She walked into the penthouse, her sharp eyes sweeping over the luxurious decor with a bright, appreciative smile. "Natalie, this place is absolutely stunning," Keisha said, handing me the bottle of wine. "You definitely kept the best inventory for yourself." I laughed, taking the bottle and walking into the kitchen to grab 2 large crystal wine glasses. I uncorked the wine, pouring a generous amount of the dark ruby liquid into each glass. I handed one to Keisha, and we walked over to the massive windows looking out over the sprawling city. To fresh starts and bulletproof contracts, I proposed raising my glass. To absolute financial accountability, Keisha countered, clinking her glass against mine. The crystal rang with a clear, bright sound. We both took a sip of the rich wine, savoring the sweet taste of victory. Keisha leaned against the window frame, looking out at the tiny cars moving on the streets below. "I got the final notification from my attorney this morning," Keisha shared, her voice calm and satisfied. "The Oakwood Drive house officially closed. Because it was a forced liquidation sale, it went for far below market value. After the bank took their massive cut for the mortgage payoff, the remaining equity was immediately seized and distributed directly to us. My $50,000 is back in my savings account, and your corporate debt is fully settled." I smiled, looking down into my wine glass. "And Ryan?" I asked, mildly curious but entirely detached. Keisha shook her head, a wry smile playing on her lips. "He walked away with absolutely zero equity. He is currently renting a tiny studio apartment on the outskirts of the city. He is working an hourly retail job to pay his legal fees because the district attorney is formally moving forward with the wire fraud indictment. David has completely cut contact with him, and Barbara is furious but powerless to help him. He thought he was untouchable, but he completely destroyed his own life." I nodded, absorbing the finality of her words. Ryan had tried to strip me of my dignity, my home, and my assets. Instead, he had engineered his own absolute ruin. Having Keisha standing in my living room sharing a glass of wine felt incredibly poetic. I had spent 5 years trying to mold myself into the perfect, acceptable wife for a toxic, narcissistic family that constantly viewed me as an outsider. I had endured Barbara's relentless, passive-aggressive insults, and Ryan's massive suffocating ego because I mistakenly believed that family meant unconditional loyalty. But trauma and betrayal have a funny way of completely redefining your perspective on loyalty. Real family is not simply determined by shared DNA. True family is built on a foundation of mutual respect, honesty, and showing up for each other when the absolute worst happens. I had lost a toxic husband, but I had gained a brilliant, loyal sister-in-law who stood by my side when it mattered the most. We had built a chosen family out of the wreckage, and it was infinitely stronger than the fragile lies Ryan had tried to sell us. Keisha eventually set her glass down, giving me a warm hug before heading back to her firm. When the private elevator doors closed behind her, I was left alone in my beautiful silent penthouse. It felt like glorious freedom. Some men think they own the castle, never realizing you are the foundation holding it up. When you walk away, the whole thing crumbles. Have you ever had to legally dismantle a toxic ex? Please share your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, hit like and subscribe to hear more stories of true resilience. Protect your peace and always remember your absolute worth. Thank you for watching my story.